and get this process going. So just I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which we are working from today, and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in our seminar. I pay my respects to the elders, past, present, and emerging, and recognise and celebrate the diversity of the Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing culture and connection to lands and waters of Australia. So thanks for joining us, those that are able to get on. Now, often we find that we have people popping in sort of throughout the seminar because it can sometimes be difficult getting in on Life is Crazy on a Saturday morning particularly. So we're going to get started. Today, we're going to walk through a little bit and share with you some stuff about the NeuroAssess tool. Sue will just talk a minute about an agenda. But when we go from there, today we have a couple of things, don't we, Sue, where we show a couple of videos, us talking, all that kind of level. But what we really point out is in the bottom of it, there's a Q&A box. Feel free, if any question pops up, just to shoot that question to us and we'll endeavour to have it answered before the seminar is complete. All right. So do you want to just talk us through the agenda?
All right, yeah, perfect. And if you could just avoid doing any chats from now, it's really important for you to focus on what it is that we're presenting. And the main reason for that is we're looking for you to participate in the trial. So this information that we're going to be sharing with you is really important. Okay, so I'm going to share our agenda with you now. So let's just get that underway. And here we go. Okay. So today's session is about introducing to you our online measures that we've created, known as in a software program known as NeuroAssess, and how you can actually look at integrating it into your clinical private practice. We do use a number of measures known as the outcome rating scale and session rating scale, the Triple H, DAS and Lucia, and we'll give you an overview of all of that information very shortly. The main purpose of today is to introduce you to the technology so that you can get a feel for it and look forward to you participating in the trial and then providing feedback to us at the very end, which is what we're really looking for. Okay, so today's agenda is obviously the welcome and introduction. We've covered off on how to ask questions during the webinar, so please feel free to use the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. We're going to cover off on the benefits and fears of eHealth technology, why NeuroAssess was developed in the first place, how easy it is for both patients and practitioners to use, an overview of the psychometric measures. We're going to take you through a very brief demonstration. It will take about 9 to 10 minutes. It will cover off on everything within the technology. So we're going to show you from the patient perspective and also the practitioner perspective, the screens that you'll see, the dashboards, and how that all integrates for you and how easy it is for you to use this technology in your practice. We'll then do a quick recap and cover off on the benefits of using NeuroAssess in your clinical practice and some questions around the trial process and any other frequently asked questions. And we will respond to your questions if you do have any towards the end of this session. Okay, so our mission is really to improve the lives of citizens around the world using psychometric measures and evidence-based measures within software programs for mental health practitioners with their patients. And the whole idea is to have it so that it's user-friendly and mobile, portable, can be used anywhere in the world as long as you've got access to data or internet. So our aim today is to demystify the variety of health IT technology aids and also to explore how a clinician can actually transition to using a range of tools in their practice. So covering off on the general benefits of eHealth, would you like to do this bit, Shane?
Oh, throwing at me, God, okay. Yep. So one of the things we notice about that is, with general benefits of eHealth and where this literature has come from is there's been some research done over the years as telehealth has become stronger. And we found that really practitioners who bring it into their service find that timely access to information really helps. The ability to, I suppose, access and retrieve information from various locations, so at the moment, I'm talking to you from my study at home and my private practice is up the street, so in that kind of situation, you can always still access and support people. We find also it reduces patients' needs to tell their story over and over again, because we're able to sort of cut and paste or download or transfer information to other referral practitioners beforehand. And also it's cost effective. In essence, it's that old IT challenge. We are actually sort of taking what was manual laboring and hard processes to be more automated and faster. And as a result of that, we save money in our practice. It also limits remoteness for access to service. In other words, what we're saying here is you'll see throughout this what I can do. Like, for example, myself, I work across the Asia Pacific region. I have, private practices. I'm based in Sydney, but I have practices in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Singapore, and Hong Kong. And what this is a tool and these tools can help with really is the ability that also during these kind of times are not present, but particularly this COVID year, I've been able to continue my practice with patients and clients I have in those kind of other destinations quite seamlessly. And that's the other advantage we find of the e-health platforms.
So some of the general fears include security of data, particularly when it's on an online platform, the cost of setting up, and the infrastructure that you might have. And we do talk about internet access, and we already know that when there are storms around, sometimes getting access to the internet can be a little bit disrupted. Reliability of technology tools, and also dehumanising the consultation. So what we know is that when patients are given this technology and complete informed consent and also intake, as well as the psychometric measures, and they're doing it remotely from the privacy of their home or their office or anywhere else that they might be. And it actually creates a situation where they feel quite safe to be more open about what's actually going on for them. And it allows for more transparent, information being given to you as a practitioner, so that you really get a feel for what's going on for your patient. The other thing is, are the measures accurate, and do they really provide the information that we're seeking? So the measures that we've chosen are very specific, and we've done that with complete intent. And the main reason behind it is we're looking for risk factors, in particular for suicide or homicide risk factors in our patients. There are other pieces of information that we do collect from the psychometric measures as well, but that's the main intent of it. And the capacity of the client to feel comfortable about using the technology. As Shane and I have both, in the infancy stages of NeuroAssess, used this technology with our parents and other elderly friends and relatives. And it was interesting how quickly, even though they didn't have a lot of expertise around using technology, how quickly they were able to actually move through using the platform and completing informed consent and providing us with information on their intake, as well as the psychometric measures. And in reality, my mum did it. She was 78, and it took her less than 10 minutes to go from beginning to end. And she asked me one question: how do I move to the next bit? And that was the only question that she asked me that whole time. It was amazing. She never uses technology. She can barely use her mobile phone. All right. So NeuroAssess really, at the end of the day, has been developed to look at what's really going on for our patients, both emotionally and subconsciously. What we know is that subconscious triggers will often create problems or situations within a patient's life, and they sometimes don't even know that that's genuinely what's going on for them. What the technology does is it gives us a bit of an alert and helps us decide what the next steps are in our therapeutic treatment for that particular patient.
All right, thanks. What I want to do at the moment, I'm just going to take a little moment of your time just to sort of share with you the story of NeuroAssess and a little bit about Sue and myself. And the reason we want to do that is I think when we're looking at maybe signing up and being a part of a trial and sort of in essence be joining an organization and some of its journey, it's good to know who's behind it and what's going on within those kind of spaces. I'm going to put a PS at the moment and apologize to everyone. My twins have just been brought back from their cancelled tennis session. So I can already hear a little bit of aggression happening in the other part of the house. If it gets loud, just let me know, so it's not too embarrassing for me, that kind of process. But anyway, they didn't get to have their run around. So let's just sort of look at our story and Neuro Balance and how we got to be where we are at this particular time. So a bit more about myself, a bit more about Sue. So Sue brings to the table many years in private practice. She, prior to her years in private practice, she was actually in the sort of the corporate world. And like a lot of people, sort of got a bit sick of that and went into the sort of the mental health stuff. In her years in the corporate world, she was involved in sort of supporting teams, supporting staff, and all those kind of things in that kind of sector. Sue is quite a well-known and well-respected community services sort of consultant, and does a lot of work in the wellbeing welfare sector, particularly in the education and school environments across Victoria. So myself, I'm sort of like one of those people who split their time between private practice and organizational development and consulting. So I do work across the Asia Pacific region, and that's, as I said, it's in the area of sort of coaching, counseling, and consulting. So that kind of level in that space. So that's the sort of stuff we bring to the table. Supporting us, though, are other people as well. So it's not just us two. We have behind the scenes working closely with us a very senior barrister in the Australian sort of public sector, and also the law courts. He's actually our legal advisor and constantly monitoring and supporting our work. Then we also have other people in the mental health sector, very senior people in the mental health sector who are very important, and play a really good role just guiding us across the diversity of the mental health. Because, it's a very broad church mental health. So that's a very important factor that's going on for us time and time again. The next sort of stuff that we also do is we actually do, in fact, have a very sort of quite switched on a board of ethical review that is imperative to us and supports us constantly in our journey. So they're a group of people who come from, again, a very broad health sector. And that is actually a group of people from clinical psychology environments, organizational environments, medical space, forensic hypnotherapy. Sorry, couldn't quite get that one out. It was one of those ones that's I could see it but couldn't say it. So apologies for that. And also occupational health space. So a whole heap of sort of areas that kind of cross over into the mental health thing. Now, why we've got that board's there for us because we're bringing forward new technology, new ideology, new approaches. So of course we need to just double check with people constantly about the challenge that might confront more within their kind of, I suppose, their practice experience. All right. Now, coming back onto that sort of process, I suppose one of the things that we offer, or what we see ourselves as a unique point of difference, is you'll notice, particularly in the videos we show you in a minute, that Sue and I are not IT people. We're not IT experts at all. We actually, in fact, are private practitioners. So we're bringing forward a sort of a concept that works well for us. And what we're trying to do is to support other people in private practice in the mental health sector about how they might be able to do things and develop. Now, let's look at the story. What triggered this particular event? And this is actually, credit to Sue. This whole NeuroAssess platform is Sue's brainchild. She actually, like a lot of people in private practice, she had one of those experiences that challenged her thinking around how effective she actually is. And I think it's really powerful as a clinical supervisor myself. I think it's really powerful that we as practitioners have those moments where you kind of go, oh my God, am I doing something wrong for my patients? Am I doing something wrong here? And the story is, to keep it quite short and sharp, and I'll speak it because otherwise Sue will want to talk along about it. But it was one of those situations where she was working with a client, doing really good things and achieving great results as she felt, had a session, client left, everything was cool. And then a couple of days later, she became aware of the fact being that this particular client had attempted suicide, and even to more of the shock, had in fact attempted suicide the day after their last session. So she had that moment that so many of us would have in that space, kind of going, how did I miss it? Like, it just seemed to be so well. My emotional reasoning was that we were on a good journey here, So did I miss something? Did I miss some cues? That kind of process. So that kind of got her a bit, disheveled, a bit sort of shaken, as you would do. The next step from that also is one of our colleagues, and who's actually on our board of ethical review, a clinical psychologist colleague, had a very similar experience within the same kind of period of time. And he was also saying the same thing, kind of, look, after, 20 years, 30 years of practice, whatever it is, I mean, how did I miss it with this particular patient? What was I doing wrong, to use that kind of ideology and thinking? So, as a result of that, Sue started talking with me because she and I have been working together on other projects for many years and thought, we've got to look at this, we've got to do something. So we actually looked at it, and the journey started really to look at a software package that could be applied in private practice to assess really the suicide risk of a client and patient. It's actually emerged and grown over that time to actually look at a whole process when we talk a lot about suicide and homicide ideology, or acting out and acting in. In other words, defining and identifying a patient where they might be in a space where subconsciously or even consciously, but can't quite put it fully in words yet, need something to end, and they might make some kind of extreme action around that. And that could be end of life decisions, or just quitting out and running out of a relationship that needs to be worked on, all that kind of process. So that's kind of where it's evolved, and we'll talk about the measures we're using to help do that in a moment. But then it's also evolved to be quite a strong tool of intake, so we think about that. Think about going to the GP for the first time and they give you that, 3 pages of work to fill out with your hand. Well, we've actually now streamlined that onto an online platform for people. So that, when a new client signs up, you can email it to them within, sort of 24, 48 hours or so, ask them to complete it, and it's all there on your system in there. And as well, they've been invited to do those measures, which give you a view on what to do. So that's kind of a brief background on us. And look, I don't want to bore you anymore. So what I'm going to do is Sue's going to throw to actually a video of a client called Jim. I'll let her tell the story a little bit. But Jim's actually one of those clients who used this for us in a very early stage and was really impressed with it. So he's been quite happy to share his story about how it worked for him and how easy it was. So Sue, do you want to introduce Jim?
Sure. So just a little bit of background about Jim before we start that video. Jim is actually from the UK. He served in the British Army while he was over there and went to some pretty horrific areas as he served, including Afghanistan. He then came out to Australia with his family and joined the Victoria Police and moved through the ranks, became a Special Operations and then Australian Federal Police member as well. So along the way, he's had quite a lot of trauma. He does talk about his experience using the NeuroAssess tool. In this particular session, he's talking about using the tool in my waiting room, and we'll explain how that can happen, because you can use it both online, remotely with patients so that they get that and you receive the responses before they arrive at your office, or alternatively, they can do this in the waiting room before their session starts. So I'll just introduce you to Jim.
Really lovely to see you. Just a quick question. What was it initially that caused you to seek counselling services?
I initially came here in relation to my marriage. It was my second marriage and I was both struggling with it. And I didn't want my second marriage to go in the direction that my first marriage went. So I thought, we thought it was best to come along and have a chat with you about our marriage. There was a lot of anger, a lot of anxiety and things like that. And I was acting in ways that were not helpful for my marriage. So
during the counselling process with your principal counselors,
it was quite. It was the first time I've ever used it. Actually, really good to use. It was on an iPad, and you basically you're supposed to know where you were at. So in your social interactions, your general well-being, how you thought of yourself, and it was quite easy to use. And it's also quite confronting at first because you actually look and you say, I'm here on the scale where I should be further up. And I will say, I cheated slightly and then look at my wife's, and hers was vastly different.
Right, so did you find that process really easy to use? Okay, fantastic. And once you actually came into the counselling rooms, what feedback was given to you?
I think initially at first you were concerned about suicide risk, but that you flagged that straight away. You said, I'm really concerned about you. I can see from your scores on here that, and you did talk to me about suicide. I'm not personally for suicide, but yes, you really sort of, you put that to me straight away.
So the tool itself actually, through algorithms, flagged that you were at risk?
Yes, and you used the word flags. That was what you used, yeah.
Okay. And during that service, as a result of not just the intake process, but other elements that came up during the counselling session, what were referred to be the experiences?
The second time I came along, I got the same or similar scores, and that was when you sort of said that you may well be a candidate for PTSD. You knew my background and my history. But it was because I got those scores again that you really went, I think you're a candidate for PTSD. And it referred me to Mark, who's my clinical psychologist now. I was already going to a psychologist, but then you referred me to Mark, who's a clinical psychologist. I found this vastly, vastly different. I also, because of what you said, I went back to my GP and I got a referral to a psychiatrist. And both Mark and the psychiatrist diagnosed with PTSD.
Okay. So we're going to now take you through an overview of the individual measures and reasoning why we've actually chosen them. And I'm going to hand over to Shane for this.
Thanks, sir. So look, yeah, as Sue said, we're just going to just briefly go through these measures. Now, look, this is not in-depth analysis of the particular psychometric profile tools are used. What we're just doing is touching on it, letting you know why we're motivated to include it, and then you'll see how we use it in our tool. We do run for you free of charge if you take up the trial, actually some background training in each of the measures. Okay, so that's an option for you to look at if you wanted to. So one that a lot of people are familiar with is the outcome rating scale and the session rating scales by Miller and Duncan, that kind of process. So what we actually got there is that if you're not, over the top of it, the outcome rating scale is something we introduced right at the very start and in the initial intake, and then invite people to do coming back all the time. And that's a scale that, is designed to look at, I suppose, in its own levels, kind of where people sit in a couple of benchmarks in their life. Okay, so, and the idea is, you kind of mark on a sliding scale how you feel, really terrible, really good, in that kind of space. And it looks at kind of just my position socially, my connection with things that are going on in that kind of level. Very simple, very straight to the point. We also have included, which we actually, you'll see will go in the flow path, comes at the very end of the journey with the client, is the session rating scale. Now, a lot of people have often have reservation around this particular one because the session rating scale is a tool that's designed to invite a patient to give us feedback of how well we have done, in the session. Are we working well? Is our treatment plan path connected with them? Do they have a good relationship with us? Is my sort of, I suppose, communication style and my approach working for you? Now, as a clinical supervisor myself, I encourage all of my supervisees, they really should be using this tool and really encouraging and inviting clients to actually complete it. Now, it's actually about that. It's about encouraging and inviting because it's not actually compulsory for the client to complete it. So that's one of the things as well, it's just sort of in that space. And I often find it's, it can be when I look at sort of the journey of people who I supervise who use it, it can be, session 2 or 3 before people feel safe to maybe do that, like that's just a common theme. So it's in that process, but it's a powerful tool because it gives feedback to you that you can often raise with your actual supervisor of, oh, what's going on? I don't seem to be working with this, or you can find some patterns. Like I had a client just recently, a supervisor recently, where we're looking at it, and we discovered there's a certain demographic that's in her clinic area but she's not really getting good feedback with, that kind of process. So, we've sort of, I've challenged you to go back and look at that, whether don't work with those people or, you've got to look at maybe what it is about that. It might be some kind of unconscious bias that's being expressed that you're not aware of and those kind of things, So it's about that kind of feedback. So moving along, we also have the Dr. David Lester Hopelessness, Helplessness and Haplessness scale, or the triple H to make it much easier. It's one of those kind of scales. And this is a very tried and tested kind of scale. It's been around since the mid-70s. It's a very, it's a cognitive assessment, but it's actually written in a way that's kind of got, a little bit of the kind of the double furphy. It's got that kind of process where you've got to sometimes read the question twice to really understand it, because it's not designed really where you can just go click, 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 to rush through. So that's the reason why I've incorporated this over other sort of cognitive sort of suicide risk tools. And we did that deliberately because we do want the client to stop for a moment and reflect, how do I feel about this particular statement? All right, so that kind of process. So the other great thing about it is David Lester's a really lovely fellow and really keen to work with us and very excited about us using this tool. So it's quite nice. He's retired now, but it's kind of in that process. I think he's enjoying having a little bit of a hobby business to mentor us in some ways, which is beautiful as well. All right. So yeah, moving further to that, we then also have what we call the Lucia Color Diagnostic. Now, the Lucia Color Diagnostic is a highly important tool as well, because it does something for us that nothing else can do. It links into what we call the primal instinctive response to color. Now, the Lucia Color Diagnostic was in fact developed way back, 1940s, 1950s, in that kind of journey of time. So it's very important and very powerful tool. So what we actually have, excuse me, I got a little man wandering through. He's got a task he had to complete in that sort of thing. But the Lucia Color Diagnostic was brought in, or we actually always had in the tool, but it's been affirmed for us when we've actually done some work with people, particularly in the world of addiction support. And they've found that this particular tool is really powerful because it's done in such a way, it links into our subconscious, and you'll see what it is if you haven't seen it before. in a way that people don't quite know what they're doing. You know, they just got to actually, they've got to be kind of almost authentic with it, really. Whereas if you are super clever, you can certainly play around with the, you know, the outcome rating scale a little bit. You can play around if you really know what you're doing with the illusion stuff. So the sort of the addiction psychologists that we're working with went, wow, this is great for that particular situation. It really taps into a different level. So those that might be, you know, therapy shopping to kind of get some kind of referral or something they want, often can be tricked a bit in that particular space. So we quite like it in that level. All right. And we also just, you know, like the colors you'll see can give you some really strong readings about where people are in their lives. And we do run a specific training course around that if you're interested in it. The other sort of tool that we've got embedded into the platform at this moment in time is the DASS, the depression, anxiety, and stress scales. Now, you'll also see this is actually not something that, you know, we get every client to do, and not something we get every client to do in every session as well. And that's done particularly because of the work by, you know, Peter Lovibond, the sort of the intellectual, you know, guy behind it. He's strongly said to us, look, you know, it needs not to be something that's done all the time. So we've actually got it there where there's a little box you can flag to choose to do it. Now, I myself, with my clients, I quite often do use it when a patient approaches me for the first time. So in an initial intake, I like to do it then because it gives me a benchmark and we work from. And then roughly, depending again, you know, how long's a piece of string, isn't it? Because every patient's quite unique. But then roughly I might just reflect upon doing it as well about every second, third, fourth session moving forward in that kind of process. Okay, because it's actually a snapshot of time of where people are at something. Okay, so that's when we use the DASS model. Okay. So that's kind of, you know, the tools that we've got in there at the moment. People always ask what else is there. Is there more that kind of process? We'll address that a little bit later, but yes, we are always working at adding more tools into the measure at all times. But for this particular trial, we've got these ones really up, running smoothly. So that's what we want to look at and run with those particular processes. All right.
Okay, and so just to let you know too, Shane and I are not IT experts. We actually had to pre-record this because we were fumbling through it. And you'll see that in this particular video that we're about to show you. So enjoy.
To create a new client, you just simply jump into your login screen, create new client, put in their name and their email address. I'm going to use Shane Warren at neurobalance.com.au, and you can see just underneath the email address there is a create client without an email account. So if you're working from your office and you have a device such as an iPad or a Samsung tablet, you can actually create a client so that they complete the intake process in your waiting room instead of remotely. Right, so I'm going to create that now, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen because Shane's going to show you his emails and show you how quickly that comes through to you.
Straight in. So 11:14, it's come through. And now I shall click on to start the intake process. 20th, you know, of the 10th. Let's make something nice and young. 1999. Process. Home address. And 125 must read. I'll do Brisbane now. My world. 048888. Contact number would be 048888.
Look into it.
Yep, sorry. Right, so we're going through this process. I agree.
So what Shane's taking us through now is the informed consent. And the informed consent's been developed by a barrister and solicitor, and it meets all of the legal requirements here in Australia.
And as you can see, it's down into bite-sized boxes for people to read rather than one long document. Deliberately done too, is it, to draw that attention to those areas. But I'm just skipping through it.
And so this is where the client has an opportunity to provide their own identity, and we normally ask people to provide a digital signature. It's the easiest method, and they can use any smart device to do this, including their mobile phone.
So now the next section is the intake form. actual intake process. As you can see, it says it takes approximately 2 minutes, which is roughly, isn't it? So that's kind of what we're finding. People are in that rough period window of about sort of, 2, 5, 8 minutes, depending on, I suppose, how fast they read in that kind of situation.
So nationality, anything with an asterisk now has to be completed. And the good thing is that patients now have an opportunity to put in details like Medicare card, which as counsellors, unless we've got Medicare rebates, it's not of interest to us. But as you can see, scroll back up, as you can see, there's information around other cards or claims that they can put in, which is really helpful if you're a psychologist and you're able to work with Medicare or work cover, TAC, that type of process, or even private health insurance.
And also, it's good that there's an employee assistance program provided there as well. It's directly around that.
So obviously, if they've got a mental health care plan, they can tick that. And then we do mandatorily ask for emergency contact details for at least one person.
Bill Smith, bill@bills.com. And what's my address? 125 State. I don't remember what I was doing.
Yeah.
And we'll say that phone number is 0423 444 888. There you go.
Right, and
Relationship to that person.
This is quite an extensive intake process where we do ask them the main reason for coming. So, Shane, what was your reason for attending counselling?
I would say separation divorce.
All right, so you'll be quickly looking at the headings as we go through to see whether anything else is relevant for you.
Substance use.
So, yeah, so obviously if they're using, and it's quite interesting actually, because what we find is because this is almost anonymous, people tend to be quite anonymous. Well, for them, they see it as being anonymous. They are quite open with the information that they do enter into the screen.
But it's people that can standard one. Most people, drink a bit of wine. So, mental health diagnosis, was seeing a psychiatrist, just for sort of some backup support around, say, burnout, fatigue. Medical dietitians. I'm a healthy, sort of person, so we'll keep that sort of fast to go through. Other things that might be happening there is, females only, so no, I'm not pregnant, that kind of process. I have no pain issues or any kind of other things that are particularly concerned. All right. Idea I'm presenting here is that I'm a fairly standard, client who might be going through some trivial issues with relationships.
Your internet's a bit slow.
It is a bit slow. Apologies for that. I'm not sure what's going on. Okay, so now we look at the outcome rating scales. This is one of the scales Major got built in. I'll just sort of fill it in. So you want to explain why I'm filling in?
Okay, so obviously with the outcome rating scale, which is Duncan Miller's work, what we're doing is assessing how that person's feeling about, we look at it as a wellbeing thing, what things are going on in their lives that might be impacting on their mental health at the moment. So this gives you a bit of a general score. And it's and you'll see the back end of it shortly, but that's the very first supplementary we use.
Right.
So the next one is the hopelessness scale, built on Dr. David Lester's work. He's a eminent suicidologist in the States. He's retired now. We have really great communication with him still. He's very focused and excited about the fact that we're using his measures in our leadership colour test. So this is the one that is how did Richard Hill term it? Primal physiological response to colour, specific colour frequencies. So the colours are a little bit different on computers as they are on your mobile phone. However, you can see where patient's actually feeling. They do get to do this twice. So the first time round, it tends to be thinking. So it's actually very cognitive, whereas the second time round, the responses are quite subconscious.
Think about what that's doing.
Yeah. All right, so that should come up saying that you successfully completed.
What you've just witnessed is the very first intake. So sometimes that can be a little bit slower, one, because the client's a little bit less familiar with it. And also just there's a few more questions involved in the initial intake process that are not present when we move forward ongoing kind of treatment.
That's correct. And as you can see how quickly that response came in. So I've now received a response from NeuroAssess, which basically gives me the results for Shane Warren. You can see his name is there. It's come into my counselling practice email address.
So I can my email right now. You need to change the screen.
Oh, sorry. Yes, of course.
Sorry about that, guys. We'll be just twice now.
Sorry, we're just learning how to use Zoom properly. There it is. Sorry, that one. Okay. So as you can see, here's the link with the results, and I can already see his level of helplessness and hopelessness is at medium risk. The Lucia colour one is a high risk, and the outcome rating scale is also high risk. So I'm going to show you now what the back end looks like. Okay, so this is Shane Moran. You can see he has his own unique client ID.
Need to change the screen share again. Sorry.
That's okay.
So that a little thing we need to keep changing the screen share.
Oh, that's right.
Yes. Apologise to everyone who's suffering through this.
This is Zoom. Unfortunately, it's not. It's a bit different to WebEx Teams, where everything just integrates a bit more smoothly. All right. So as you can see here, this is Shane's screen. I'm just going to move us a little bit further away. So his history is the current history, as you can see here, and this is basically Shane's client dashboard or patient dashboard. You can see his levels of helplessness and hopelessness 58% and 68% respectively, which puts him into a medium risk category. Over here, as you can see, the Lucia colour test. The indications here on the first run is that he is completely over something in his life. The colours indicate to me that there is a stress factor, and it is a past stress factor as well. And then in the second run, the colours indicate to me here that Shane is very angry about something as well. And the colours are indicating that it's affecting his health. The outcome rating scale, as you can see, scored 7.5, and we already know that the ideal range for the ORS is 25. In here, you can see Shane's details, and if anything happens to be wrong, we can adjust it. The consent form is the informed consent, which has been automatically emailed to Shane, and in that it has the informed consent, all the details, and his signature. This is very important for legal purposes if your records are ever required. And emergency contact details, you'll see that Shane's the first emergency contact is listed here. If you had a second one, it would appear next to it over here. And then I've got my own personal local emergency contacts that I have listed in the on the main home screen. All right, so having taken all of that into consideration, I'm going back into the history, and I am now going to be doing a counselling session with you, Shane. So we've already set up our Zoom session, and while I've got Zoom on, I can start the session with him, and as you can see, it's automatically flagged that Shane may be at risk of suicide or homicide. So it gives me automatically, that's my warning, and it tells me now that how I can actually proceed with this particular session. It gives me a few tips. So I'm going to click OK. I'm going to be taking some notes here. What does Shane look like? Is appropriate? The casual wear. Does he look a little bit tired? I'm going to say that he does. His speech is not slurred because he hasn't been drinking before the session, which is really great. Because it's online, obviously I can't tell what it is, and you can hold the square. He's looking a little tired. I can ask him, have you been sleeping well lately?
No, actually, not at all.
Right, so a little bit poor there. And are you feeling a bit anxious?
Yeah, actually, yeah.
All right. And the other things are, you know, you might be a little bit tearful during the session. So I'm just going to tick all of that. The other thing that I'm going to do now is I'm going to minimise this. You can see here I've got a suicide questionnaire. So I'm going to start these questions. There are 3 different levels, and I can skip to those levels simply by clicking next once I've read through these questions really quickly. So, Shane, have you been feeling really unhappy lately?
Yes.
Do you sometimes think that it's more than you can bear?
Yes.
Okay. Do you feel that something needs to end at the moment?
Yep, totally. That's why I'm separating.
Yeah, okay. And it's your relationship, is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. So I'm just writing some notes while we're talking. I hope that's okay with you, Shane. So have you actually separated now, or are you still in the process of separating?
We're in the process.
Okay, so, and I can keep going on and ask Shane a whole range of questions, which gives me a bit of an indication of what's going on for Shane. And again, this is a legal process that covers us when we're dealing with clients who are online. If Shane was in a really serious state, I would definitely go to the next level of questions. And as you can see, they start to escalate. So we're starting to ask more really specific questions, you know, about things such as family history of violence or abuse. Have they got recurring thoughts about the traumatic event or past experience, which may indicate PTSD, for instance. You know, obviously experiencing major stresses in an important relationship. They haven't actually separated yet, but you are going through that. Is it a legal dispute? Are you actually involving lawyers at this stage, or?
Not yet.
Not yet, okay. So, and you can see that by me taking Shane through these questions, it helps build a picture for me of exactly where my patient is at. Okay, so the next questions are really, you know, questions for where there is a very clear concern. I'm going to say at this stage that I think the reason why Shane is appearing so angry is that he is really disappointed about the way the relationship's gone. He's outer-directed at the moment. He's blaming his partner. Perhaps something's gone wrong there. And, you know, in the counselling session, I would determine that, you know, it might turn out that his partner has cheated on him, which would explain why he's so angry. And Lucia's indicated that something needed to end, and what it is that's ending is actually the relationship. So sometimes a flag doesn't necessarily mean that the person is prepared to take their life. However, it's always important for us to check and make sure. So the good thing about this tool is it gives you a warning, a very clear warning. You can see here it takes you through ideation, intent, and plan, and also homicidal intention plan. I love that the last few questions are around consequences. So as you're building this picture, you're able to then draw out of the patient and get them to start, you know, rather than internalising everything, having a look at their extended family, so that ripple effect, and having a look at how that's going to impact on other people around them. So taking it away from themselves and out their immediate concerns. So I'm just going to finish here. All right, and I'm going to go back to my notes. So during this, just going to wait for that to happen. Okay, so during the session, I'm going to say that, you know, at times Shane's speech was soft, and at other times it was quite pressured, and he was going off on a tangent occasionally. His affect was quite flat and anxious, angry, and agitated. Now, this is where I can start typing in my own notes. So I'm going to say Shane is working on the separation process, is considering legal advice, would like to possibly attend for counselling with their partner, just to, you know, just with a view to perhaps ending the relationship in a civil manner. All right, so I'm just going to pop that down. I might have some other goals, which might be checking on Shane, and there might be other goals such as consider communication skills between him and his partner. I might also put in a referral perhaps for to a psychologist, just in case I think that might be needed. And they're all question marks because they're at the next session. Now, if I've done handwritten notes, I can now choose a file, and I'm going to just close that one because, sorry, I'm going to go here to a committee meeting file. I'm going to upload that, and I'm going to save my notes because obviously I don't want to be putting up real notes. They're not, this is a test session really. I'm going to now end the session, and I'm going to stop sharing and hand back to Shane because Shane will show you. I've been another appointment. In a moment, Shane will show you how quickly he gets a feedback on the session, so he gets the session rating scale. I'm going to put in that we've got another appointment. I'm going to leave it the way it is because I know that will be, so we're going to move forward and pretend that it's a week from now. All right, so I'm sending that link again, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Great. Now I'll start sharing my screen. Okay, you see that this was coming in my link there to Sue, email from Sue saying, thanks for coming to the session, please fill in the session rating scale. So click on that link, come back and do the changeover of the session screens. Okay, now I want to share that screen. Okay. Can you see the session rating scale now? So this is the further sort of work, isn't it, that we've got building from the outcome rating scale earlier in the start in that process. And now we just want to look at, really this is a process of me as a client saying, in essence, giving some feedback to my practitioner about, how I connect, how well we're going, and that kind of stuff. So it'll be nice. So my ratio was really good, really higher. Felt my goals and topics were listened to, approach and method was fine. And in general, yep, I'm pretty happy. And then we just submit.
Sorry, the outcome rating scale is the green and the session ratings. And in here, when I go to emergency contacts, I can actually send this to him or to someone else by hitting on Control P or Control F to search if I'm looking for a particular referral, and Control P to print, and I can send that to him straight away, or to anyone else that he nominates if he's, needing some additional support. The good thing is at the bottom of the list, not only do I have my local emergency contacts, but there's also all the national numbers. You can see here Shane's email address is here for me to send, quickly copy and paste and send to him in an email. So there's a whole lot of referral numbers on here that we check over once a year, and we make sure that all of the numbers and contact details are correct. Okay, so that's available on every single client. Okay, so we're back.
Sorry about that. My system froze up, so I had to sort of do a little bit of a rejig. Sorry.
All right, good to have you back. Okay, so we're going to do a really quick recap of the platform now. So we've got informed consent. You've seen that, just a brief overview of the intake, the psychometric measures and how they actually operate. We didn't take you through the DAS because that actually takes a little bit longer. Yeah. How the warning flag works, the suicide, homicide questions, drilling down to 3 different levels, so ideation, intent and plan, and also those other questions around consequences. The best part about this, and you'll see this in a moment, we'll show you a little bit more, is the graphing, and which shows you a trend of the patient's therapy and their therapeutic progress. So you can actually see whether things are improving for your patient over a period of time, or alternatively, where there's been a hiccup for them in their personal life. And the other side of it is, am I an effective practitioner for this particular person or couple? If not, do I need to think about referring on? I've taken you through the emergency contact list and how the patient notes, practitioner notes actually work. You don't actually need to handwrite notes. You can actually just type your notes directly into the system and not have any handwritten notes at all if you prefer. I like to handwrite and then attach my PDF notes later. All right. So just a quick recap. This is what the informed consent looks like. As we said earlier, it has been developed by a barrister and solicitor and is very legally binding. Fantastic for when your files are subpoenaed or required for whatever reason. You can actually assess through the informed consent whether you do actually need to hand over those notes or not. I had a situation where I had a client who had an intervention order against him. His solicitor wanted a copy of my notes, and I was able to, based just on the informed consent, I was able to actually refuse doing that because doing so would potentially put the other person at risk. Okay, so a reminder of, you know, what the intake process looks like, how easy it is for a patient. Mind you, we were using a computer. Most patients actually use their mobile phone to enter their information. And it is very quick and easy to do on your mobile phone as well. So these are the measures again. A reminder about the warning flag and the 3 different levels of questions in the suicide risk questionnaire link. And this is what the therapeutic trend looks like for the helplessness, hopelessness measure. You did see the full dashboard earlier. So you can see that this particular patient has had improvement as each session has been conducted, and you can see down the bottom here the dates that they've actually completed the psychometric measures. Their outcome rating scale, this particular patient started off quite low and has moved up and into the ideal range by the 3rd session. So that's an indication for me that therapy is going well and it's heading in the right direction. So, you know, we're on point. And this is the client's dashboard. So the Lucia, you've got the helplessness, hopelessness measures up above there. It's been cut off by the screenshot. Outcome rating scale, and it starts down the bottom. So this was the 1st session, 2nd session, 3rd session. And you can see here that I've got some notes and that I've attached records as well. And that's what more or less the dashboard kind of looks like. You can see here on this particular one, the patient has gone through the DAS, and we've, which is flagged quite high on this particular patient. And you can see here the suicide questions, the responses to those particular questions, sorry, the questions that have been asked, and the responses to those questions is in the bold font.
And I think, Sue, just back there very quickly, just to show that screen back, I like the thing that's important to point out about the deep red, the lighter red, yellow, and green. So, you know, the measures reflect in that kind of stoplight concept for you. Deep red being kind of ding, 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 be really aware where this client is, do some really, you know, strong intervention work here. Red is also kind of like, hey, we're worried. You know, you really should think about your treatment and your time with this particular person and how you might be able to assist them about some decisions they're making. Yellow is go with caution. You know, the amber alert, just look with this, be aware of this kind of stuff. And green is a little bit like, go with it, buddy, ride like you were planning on doing to some level. You know, obviously things are working. You know, like that's kind of the way in which those signs kind of indicate for you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and just a refresher about the emergency contact details. You can populate your own local emergency contacts on your profile, practitioner profile. And obviously you've got all of those details very handy, and you can PDF and send to either the patient or a close contact of theirs. So they've got not only the local emergency contact numbers, but they've also got the national numbers, which is at the bottom of the screen. Okay, and the session rating scale, which is a feedback form, as Shane said earlier, patients can choose to do that or not. And that's up to them to decide whether they want to give feedback. Those who are interested in having a bit of a say in their therapy will give feedback. Others, you know, don't worry about it because they think that it's all going well, and so they often will not necessarily respond. Okay. So some of the benefits and advantages for practitioners who are interested in integrating this into your practice, you will have an opportunity over the 4-month trial period to integrate it into your practice, see what you think. At the end of that, you can choose to continue on or not, and we'll cover that off when we do the Q&A. Okay, so some of the key benefits are about empowering consultation. So in reality, it really is a great tool for you to be able to use in your practice. It helps you make a decision based on the outcomes for your patient as to whether or not you're going to continue with therapy along the lines that you originally thought you were going to be going along, or whether you actually need to change. And it helps support the reasons for you making that change. It really is a great way of guiding you as a practitioner as to what you need to do next. So it makes you far more efficient and effective. It is leading edge technology. You can use this on any smart device. And in fact, to be perfectly honest, I do everything on my mobile phone. I very rarely use my computer except for when I'm attaching notes at the end of a session, but everything else I do beforehand on my phone. It is state-of-the-art software, and we do use licensed evidence-based measures, and we'll talk a little bit more about some exciting possibilities that we're looking at to add to our suite of psychometric measures. Okay, so some of the advantages. Did you want to talk to this, Shane?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, as we've been touching on throughout the whole journey, the idea of, a tool like this is to try and really assist you as a private practitioner, in that intake process, and then the guiding the therapy moving forward. So, there's some really key factors around that. Reduce the cost of administration because, if you're often having to employ somebody else, or not employ someone else, but just actually take the time out yourself to take in paper notes, convert them to soft copy, all these kind of things. So there's that kind of ease that we have with it. We certainly also look at about secure storage of the client data. It's often one of the things that people do have concerns about, and that is about that where is the data stored, what happens to it, all those kind of questions. We actually deliberately have made a decision that we keep our server in Australia. We're currently using a server housed in Sydney. We were using one in Melbourne just recently, but just for upgrading purposes, it's now been moved to a server in Sydney. And that we do that deliberately because it actually, legally, Australia has very high standards around privacy, protection of data, these kind of issues. And that's something we will always be doing, is looking at the best place and the safest place for you and your patients to keep that data in this secure way. All right. The data is secured in an encrypted kind of concept. I'm not an IT person, so I don't understand all this sort of stuff, but basically, it's designed so that, should God forbid something happen, no one can actually access the data other than you. Ultimately, that's what it's about. All right. Good thing about it, like we've spoken earlier, like the access to client records, no matter where you are, so there's that ability, your school holidays, off with the family, having a good time, that kind of process, but you need to actually do maybe a bit of an emergency support session with a client, well, you don't have all your notes with you when you're traveling, do you? So that's the other advantage. You can just log in, brief yourself a little bit more, see what's going on, that kind of stuff, and then pick up that call or that Zoom session you might want to do with the client from wherever you are. So those kind of things, it's portable. So as Sue alluded, we find most of our clients do it really either often on mobile phones, but if not, like on a tablet type, an iPad or a Samsung tablet, all that kind of things. And then of course the next step is laptop, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, because people do it, and often again, with my kind of client group, they often do it I'll take a moment sitting in a coffee shop just before I go and see Shane, just to get it done, like that kind of process. But that's all right, because what we're looking at is a real-time sort of snapshot of where they're at, as they're presenting to us. And again, of course, the key advantage is you reduce time spent on analyzing stuff. Like this is automated, it's online, it's straight away. I don't know if you guys were using psychometric measures in your practice now or have done in the past, but I remember when I was doing paper stuff, it's fidgety, it's annoying, it's, even, and particularly, when you've done 3 or 4 patients in a row and you're trying to even just add up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and add all those up, you get confused a little bit. So this is all taken away. So that's the kind of advantage in that space.
I love that. That's one of the things that I love, is the fact that it's instantaneous. Like in reality, the moment the patient has completed the psychometric measures, if you happen to be on that particular client's dashboard, you just need to refresh your screen and the results are there instantaneously. So the other thing that this particular technology does is it allows for open, transparent conversation. So, there's no more fluffing around anymore. As you could see with the video with Jin, as soon as he had done his measures, I looked at the results and I said, this is telling me you're not in a great space at the moment. How are you feeling, really? And it allowed me to just get straight in to the real problem, rather than waiting for, going through a whole session and invariably either the patient doing one of 2 things. They either blurt everything out the last 5 minutes just before you're about to end the session and you've got another patient coming in, or alternatively, they don't talk about it at all. And there's an inherent risk in both. And so it's important for us to be able to tackle those really difficult conversations early on. The other part of it is the graphing of the outcomes. It really does give you an idea of how that patient is tracking, whether you're effective as a practitioner. You can see straight away when there has been a blip, they may be tracking along really well, and then all of a sudden something's happened in their life and their scores have blown out again. And that's really great because you can just go, hey, you know, things are going really well, what's happened? Rather than waiting again for them to, you know, get around to telling you what's really going on. So our efficacy is improved simply because we've got access to this tool and have an understanding what is genuinely going on for our patients. We're able to tap into their subconscious emotional needs. And it allows us to regulate our own practice and our own therapeutic process. And in that way, we're able to really have a look at, am I doing the right thing for the patient? Am I the right person for this patient? Are things going well? If not, do I actually need to refer on? You know, I'm doing all this work with this patient and I'm not seeing many changes. What else needs to happen? What am I missing? Does this person need a clinical psychologist or a psychiatrist to make further assessment? Because there may be something going on that I'm not across. Okay. So did you want to speak to this, Shane?
I'll pick up on this. So look, you know, we've invite you, if you've got some questions, please go into the Q&A and ask that. But we've also, you know, to make it easier on people, we found there's a few questions that keep coming up. So we'll just sort of talk through those points for you. So, you know, why does my practice need this tool and how does it help me as a practitioner? Well, we've touched a little bit about that on the keys and the advantages of those kind of areas. You know, I mean, I just sort of stick to that kind of point. You know, what I find it does for me in my private practice is, you know, one, it's an efficient way to actually go through that intake process. You know, even when if I'm not wanting to do psychometric tools, and you know, I'm actually find I've got all that data, name, address, next of kin, all those kind of things really strongly there. So it helps in that. The other second component I like about it is, you know, the efficacy kind of strategy that, you know, Sue was just touching on there, where it actually helps me really look at where the client is presenting here and now, and I can look at it straight away and I can go, hey man, you know, look, you know, something's coming out here. It's actually showing to me that you're in a bit of a space where things are a bit tough. What's happened, you know, that kind of level, you know, where are we going in that level? You know, is there something happened since our last session, you know, when you start graphing on or further? Or the other key thing about it, it also can be really powerful because you can look at going, well, things are working. So I'm not going to ask that kind of question along the lines of, you know, oh, what bad shit's happened since you last saw me? It's actually kind of going, wow, you know, what are the good things that are happening? Because we're seeing some real results here, you know, so we can actually really help the person sort of, you know, in that kind of positive frame moving forward. Sorry, I come from a bit of a positive psychology background, so I use a lot of that positive framing stuff a lot in my work. So that's the kind of process. We also find really what's quite good about it is that, you know, the intake questions around some of the symptoms do in fact trigger past memories and exposure. And people think, oh, was that a good or a bad thing? Well, actually, I like it because what it's actually done is it's actually helped put the person in a frame of thinking so that when they are coming in to meet with me, there is that kind of space where we can go, oh, well, you know what? Actually, what came up for me when I was doing that intake, with thoughts that happened around this, you know, which was kind of primarily why I made the appointment. But, you know, that's what's helped there. I mean, who has not had a session where, you know, you've got someone sitting in front of you and, you know, and they kind of go, oh, sort of feel a bit bad being here today because I feel so good, you know, that kind of process. And I didn't really, you know, can't really remember why I made the appointment like, you know, 2 weeks ago now and all that kind of situation because, you know, things have got better. But often we find by actually having that intake sort of stuff, it gives you those kind of prompts and go, wow, well, what was happening when you answered around this question, or what was happening when this happened, you know, in that kind of space. So it's quite a powerful level. Do you want to just flip on the next question there, Sue? Because often another one that leads from that is definitely stuff around trauma. So I think that's our next question, isn't it? Yeah. You know, often people do ask us, like, you know, does the tool, you know, accommodate for trauma, you know, complex trauma and victims of crime assessment, that kind of process? Well, look, you know, to be honest, straight away, at this moment in time, we do not have a specific trauma-focused questionnaire in the tool that you've seen today. We are exploring that sort of stuff, and I'll keep adding on to that in a minute. But we are exploring a number of different measures, and we are looking at the moment around one of these kind of measures around particularly victims of crime, and also looking at particularly that kind of post-traumatic stress sort of stuff. We are open also, if you've actually got a tool that you might be using in your practice and you find really works well, share that with us, you know, that not even just around trauma, around anything. All right. So I'll talk a bit more about some of the other stuff we're doing later. But yeah, so that's kind of process. The other good thing about though what we find in the trauma journey with the tool, how it currently sits, is the Lucia stuff does actually give you insights in that when you're trained to read those color combinations. And sometimes just the prompt questions, although it can be alarming, it does bring up stuff for people to want to talk about as well. So that's a kind of benefit we have with it. All right. How does it protect my practice? Well, look, ultimately, at the end of the day, the informed consent document is the key thing there, that it really is a good protection for you. It's a legally binding agreement that clients enter into. And this is stuff that we should be doing in our practices now. And I know as a supervisor, a lot of my supervisees, who are not using the tool by their own choice this moment in time, I'm bullying them into it, but that kind of process. But what I'm finding is, they are not doing this anyway. They might have a really sort of abridged little sign off in an intake form, but they're not really being upfront with people about all the things. And I suppose our responsibilities as informed, informed consent. So our responsibilities as actually mandatory reporters, our responsibilities around, sort of duty of care responsibilities to the patient and others in their life, all these kind of things that we don't really honestly address up front with the client is actually addressed in that informed consent. So it gives us permission to, act in ways we might want to act, to protect data in the ways we might want to protect data, those kind of things. And that's where it's a very powerful kind of tool. And as Sue has said, it's been developed by a very senior barrister for us based in Melbourne, who's quite all over that sort of situation, that sort of stuff. So he's really pulled that together for us. So do you want to add more?
I do actually. So when your files are subpoenaed and you're comfortable, and you're comfortable giving your file notes over, you can actually just PDF the entire client dashboard, and all of your attachments will, you can then, if you've got any, that is, you can also attach those PDFs and send the whole thing as a PDF to the solicitor or the courts.
Appropriate bodies.
Okay.
Just want to pick up on the court word where you used there as well. One thing that was very important is, this actual, our notes and our tools are, are already being used in legal areas, actually, in that space. I myself, as part of my practice, do a lot of kind of assessment work that goes into various levels of kind of tribunal and court stuff. I do a lot of work with migration tribunal. I do a fair bit of work, sadly, now with family courts. Not something I really chose to do. I say sadly because I don't really enjoy that, but that's just kind of where the world goes, and that kind of process. And this particular, our material has been quite well respected in that level. So the DAS is an optional on NeuroAssess. Yes, that kind of process. People often ask, when do I use a DAS? Well, it's an optional kind of situation, and as we often go, it's it's patient and practice dependent. So whatever's working for you guys in the way in which you work is how you do it. So it's a little box that's there. You might have noticed it in the journey. We'll definitely coach if you agree to go on the trial, we'll coach you through the platform a bit more. You can see this little box that just pops up. Do you want this client to do a DAS? Tick yes, or just leave it blank if no. Like as simple as that kind of process, right? So are there any functions planned for future updates? Well, that's the exciting thing. Yes, there is. What we are talking about now, though, today, and the invitation to be a part of this kind of 4-month trial for us, this journey of trial, is around that kind of situation. We need to just sort of, look at how it's working now and what's not working, what's not working. It's a very genuine kind of approach. We are reaching out to people who are working in the profession who may see a benefit of this to sort of give us some real critical review about the tool. But on top of that, we are looking at a number of exciting measures. We're looking at some stuff around, specifically around stress management. We're looking around some stuff that's related to the areas of resilience and resilient assessment and diagnosis sort of stuff. We're looking at relapse into addiction kind of components. We're looking at some trauma questionnaires and surveys. We're also looking at a little bit of a sort of a bit about a geriatric depression scale that can be applied not just with the elderly, but it's written in that context. So there's a couple of tools that we've really got at the moment on the ground that we're just sort of finalizing and looking at legal licensing issues to be able to use it. We're also looking at stuff, when we actually identify a tool, we often also talk to our IT partners to actually sort of go, would this work? Because there's some things that don't necessarily translate so well from a piece of paper onto a screen. And so we've got to look at that as well to make sure that it's actually engaging enough that the client will complete it. So there's those kind of things, and also not too complex, because similar sort of situations, like, you will have noticed in some of the journey there, we talk about the Triple H measure, the helplessness, hopelessness, and haplessness stuff, but yet we only really grade the helplessness and hopelessness stuff because that's the stuff that indicates risk of acting out or acting in much stronger. And that's sort of stuff that decisions we've made to sort of shorten assessment down, and also to not crowd your dashboard for you so it's all confusing and all that sort of thing. So there's a couple of other things that go on the back end. But when I'm sharing that with you as well, is please, if you have a tool that you have come across and you love and you think, you might want to be a part of our trial and use this going forward, we ask you to come back to us, because that's how we know what we can actually work better. It's a peer-driven process in that level, and that's what we really are working from. Can you explain when the data security measures? Can you explain what the data security measures are? That kind of process, and who's eligible to use system. So look, in that kind of process, look, what we talk about there, the measures are there to support you and look at how you guide your practice. The data security that we have in that level is it's highly encrypted, it's highly protected. Only you can access that data, right? Like that's the kind of situation. Neither Neuro Balance or, Sue or Shane from our own kind of computers home have the ability to access your data. It's there. Even our IT people, for them, it's a scrambled screen if they actually were able to see anything, like, that kind of stuff. It's all quite secure on those levels. So that kind of level. Who's eligible to use the system? We actually talk about in that context, because it's developed for mental health professionals, we have put a benchmark down to actually be on our tool and be on our pilot and even actually use it moving forward. Is you need to meet a minimum standard of membership to a professional mental health association. Now, that's a very broad church, isn't it? And we actually acknowledge that. So, we work very closely with the Australian Counselling Association, with PACFA and with AASW, the social workers group. We also have a relationship, but a little bit different with psychologists, but that's just the way the world works in that one, but we're moving that forward. And also across borders, because we do work within New Zealand and within particularly sort of Southeast Asia at the moment. So there's a number of different professional bodies there. So what we've said is you need to meet a certain minimum standard of training and qualifications, which basically is the same minimum standard they would have in place. That means you are able to do private practice, get insurance, and basically open up your doors and work on a one-on-one or a group session with people. That's the standard. That's how we work with it. All right.
Okay, so when does the trial start? So the trial basically starts the month for you. It is a 4-month trial. We're conscious of the fact that Christmas and New Year come into it, and we often do take a 4-week break. So, it'll be 4 weeks of actual therapy or use of the actual technology, bearing in mind that we will allow that 4-week break. So we're hoping to start in the middle of November or towards the end of November. We have had a couple of people who have asked, can they start this in the new year? And the answer is yes. At the end of the day, what we're really looking for is that feedback to see whether, what changes it is that you can see using this technology in your practice. Shane and I have been using this technology for about 12 months now. It's been on an online platform for 12 months. So we've been using it. We're really familiar with it. But being that familiar means that we also can't see where there's some issues. So we'd love to get some feedback on whether or not there are any issues. What commitments do you have to make? All we're asking for is for you to sign up, use the technology, do use it with your patients. We do give you an opportunity to test it with family and friends before you actually use it with your patients, just so that you're really familiar with it as well. And do use it for the period of 4 months, at the end of which we will be giving you basically a survey monkey, asking you for feedback and responding to any questions that we've got. As far as the trial goes, if you decide not to continue with the subscription at the end of the trial period, that's okay. We give you an additional 30 days for you to access your data and to be able to then PDF all of your client records and store them on your own hard drive, at which point, or even print them up if you prefer to. And then we wait another 6 months after that. We archive your records. We wait 6 months, and at the end of that 6-month period, we then delete everything that's stored there, and it's a permanent delete. It will be unrecoverable. The ongoing fees, at the moment, it's $33 a month. However, as a thank you to you for participating in the 4-month trial, we give you, for 12 months, the fee will be $23, so it's a 30% discount. And basically what you're doing is you're getting, for this cost of, I think it was about $276, you're basically getting 16 months worth of our NeuroAssess technology.
So there's someone's come in with a question there about, is there an appointment booking option with reminders, receipts for payments? At the moment, in the tool, we haven't got that. It is something we're moving towards. And the reason we haven't got it is because we've found, just going out there with different people have different schedulers. So we're looking around that. Just sort of between you, me, and the fence post, Sue and myself have been looking closely around it, and we're finding that we would like to have a plug-in in some way to do that for people who might want to choose it. And we were talking with our IT partners about it, and we haven't affirmed directly what it is, but we will be honest with you. We are at the moment favouring Acuity Scheduler and Xero. They seem to be working well with the platform. So we're looking around that. And it's just, again, this is a bit like, what we're sort of saying. We are an ever evolving tool. We are growing in that space. So we're very open to look at what you might be using now, what other people might want to have. This, I said it a bit earlier, I dropped in, it's a peer-driven process that we're working with here. And we're really quite upfront with that. So, we've got to this point, but, if you know something that works well and you want to give us that feedback, please do, but just on that point, today, or, if you pick up the tool and start running with it sort of by the end of November, we haven't got the plugin working with the appointment schedulers and the sort of the bill payments and receipt stuff just yet. We are working on that, and I'm throwing out there, honestly, we are finding Acuity Scheduler and Xero seem to be our preferred because they seem to have a very good plug-in ability with other tools like this. But we are open to explore other options if you know of some. All right, so that kind of level. I hope that.
I have to say, I love Acuity. We actually no longer have no-shows because we actually take a $50 deposit at the time that people make their booking. And I thought that I was going to get a lot of pushback from patients. They all do it. Like, it's surprising. My business has actually grown during this stage 4 COVID here in Melbourne. And, I think having the online booking system and an online intake process, and then being able to use Zoom and have it all integrate, really, for me at least, it's been integrated really quite seamlessly. And the best part about it for me is Xero, because Acuity and Xero talk to each other. I no longer have to do invoices. I know that, the only thing that I do is reconcile, and that takes a couple of minutes in Xero. And those patients who require an invoice, I just send it off to them. So it's really quick and easy. Yeah. All right, so that's it. Does anyone else have any other questions? I'm going to stop sharing the screen now. Okay, so did we have any other questions?
No, there's nothing more coming through, so that's kind of cool. So look, guys, thanks for your time, isn't it, really? That's where we're sort of at. Our next step from here is you'll definitely be getting an email reach out from us just to sort of see what your thoughts are. Please be honest with us about that. Come back to around it, and we'll be inviting people to look at maybe picking up the trial. As Sue said, some people have come to us saying, look, end of year, I don't want to get involved in anything now. Can I look at this next year? Yes, you can, right? We're aware of that, right? I mean, our motivation, our goal is we want to work with other people now who are in the industry to give us better, more kind of real-time, real experience review, and even what else you want to see in such a tool. Help us with that, like we think we know what would work, but that's based upon basically just us and our kind of peer reviewers have already got. It's a small group, so we all do very similar work. So there's definitely stuff we're missing.
And just on something else as well, we've had a lot of interest actually from the UK and a couple of people from the USA as well. Yeah. So the automated emailing system for the psychometric measures, not the initial one that you set up for the patient, but any after that, automatically those emails are sent out 48 hours before the scheduled appointment that you put into the system. And we are speaking already with the software developer, and he's looking at putting in some country zones and time zones. And the PDFs with the informed consent are things that Shane and I are looking at with regard to law and legislation within specific countries, so that when they nominate what country they are, the PDF, the informed consent is relevant to that particular country. All right, so if you've got no other questions, I think
we're done. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you for joining us. Thank you. Thanks, Rebecca.
Yeah.
All right, we'll look forward. We're going to be contacting everyone in the next few days just to have a chat and see where you're at. And if you're interested in participating in the trial, we will set you up. And we will also then invite you to, it is a 3-hour, unfortunately, online session on actually the more details around the psychometric measures so that you've got a lot more information around that. We do also offer a full day of training on the Lucia that is very extensive, and it does, you walk away with your head swimming. It's quite a full-on day, but that's something that we add on as and offer a discount to those patients or to those participants, I should say, who are interested in doing further training, particularly in Lucia.
And that training also is CBD approved, so you can actually get the points for you.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Kind of stuff.
All right. So thank you all very much. We look forward to
one. I think we should just add in. Yes, people often say, when we sign up, what's the help? Sue and I will actually, guide you through. We'd like to do a bit of an online Zoom with you and go, here, what are you having trouble with, or what can't you find in the back end, that kind of stuff. So you'll get that support as well.
Yeah, sorry, I did forget to mention that. Yeah, we will be actually spending one-on-one time with each of you, talking you through it. So we look forward to having you guys come on board and working with you very closely. Take care.
Bye, guys.
Bye.